All right, guys, it's time to go over and break down all the PFF grades from yesterday's nasty, nasty loss over the Carolina Panthers, 16-13 here in Week 9. A lot went wrong in this game, not only from the outcome, but the tons of injuries that occurred in this game. We're still waiting for the news of Tucker Kraft. Just wanted to stop it here because obviously, since I first made this video, the terrible news came out that Tucker Kraft did in fact tear his ACL and is out for the year. I made a video on it right after I made this one. That'll probably come out first. So if you want to go check that out, I go into depth on that injury, what it means, who could potentially pick up the slack for Tucker Kraft being out for 2025. Just horrible, horrible news to hear this morning. But back into the PFF video. But of course, we do still have to take a look at, break down all the PFF grades. It's a lot more fun on a Monday, of course, after a massive win like it was last week breaking down these grades. But nonetheless, we still have to do it through a loss. So let's just dive right into it and rip the Band-Aid off. If this sort of thing does interest you and you also want to stay in the loop with everything Green Bay Packers this season, I would highly suggest going down and hitting that subscribe button. Also turning on post notifications so you don't miss any of the videos or news that comes out for your Green Bay Packers. All right, so let's dive right into this thing and bring up the screen. First, we're going to start on defense. Now, the defense played better than the offense, but at the same time, we didn't get enough pressure and we couldn't stop the run. Now, in terms of grades, in terms of players at the top, some players that I think will be at the top, Xavier McKinney, I talked about him in the post game, had probably the player of the day on the defense. Also, two of the linebackers. I talked about this as well in post game. I really liked what I saw from Isaiah McDuffie. It felt like the few times we did stop their run game, it was because of Isaiah McDuffie and also Edgerrin Cooper. So I feel like those three players could be somewhere near the top. I feel like X will definitely be our highest graded on defense, and I think McDuffie and Edgerrin Cooper. So let's dive right in, and it is X, McDuffie, and Cooper. There we go. That might be the first time this season I got all three in the exact order. That is quite impressive, but you see the big drop-off after X and McDuffie, right? We have X with an 82.4. That's his highest grade of the year, and he's had 2 games now, 3 games actually in a row with a above 70 grade, which is great to see. We're starting to see more of that 2024 Xavier McKinney making plays left and right. Awesome interception in the back of the end zone. The strip sack thereafter. 82.4 grade. Pass rush grade 91.3. Coverage 75.8. And again, he's the only player with a recorded sack in this game, which is just inexcusable considering how poor that Carolina offensive line is, how many backups they had playing. Just inexcusable. Isaiah McDuffie only played in 19 snaps, but the snaps he did play in an 81.7 grade. Again, I feel like he was run fitting pretty well. Edgerrin Cooper, 58 total snaps, 68.5. Had 7 tackles in this game. Now, Micah Parsons is our 4th highest graded player, but I think we can all agree it was his worst game as a Green Bay Packer. You know, a 66.6 grade, and also a 1 pressure. That's it. Now, at Next Gen Stats, the NFL Next Gen Stats don't have him listed as with a pressure, which would be the first time in his career, whereas PFF does. So, you know, take that as you will, but nonetheless, it was still a pretty poor game. Now, he played in a lot of snaps. So 58 snaps is 100% of the snaps. He played in 53, which is, I think, 91%. I think that might be part of the reason. I think he got played too much in this game, whereas you look at someone like Rashawn Gary, who played in 41 snaps. Maybe Micah Parsons needed a couple more breathers to be at full force on some of those plays. I'm fine with Parsons playing around 80+% of snaps, but 91 I feel like is really high for an edge rusher. So maybe that's part of the reason why, but overall just not a good game from him. We needed more, especially against this banged up O-line. Nixon, our highest graded corner, 66.5. Outside of the PI, I thought he did play a pretty good game. I think he only allowed like 1 reception. We'll take a look at coverages right after this. Evan Williams, 64.8. Good tackle grade. He had 4 tackles with 0 missed. Javon Bullard, 64.2. Had a poor tackle grade because he did actually miss 2 tackles, but he did make 4 tackles and had 2 stops, so that's great. Nazir Stackhouse had to play a little bit more in this game once Colby Wooden left. That's something to monitor going forward. Wooden's been kind of the backbone of this defense in terms of the run defense. 64.2. Enigbari, 63.1. He had 2 pressures. Rashawn Gary led the team in pressures with only 3. Again, this is inexcusable. 62.3. Devontae Wyatt, 60.3. Only had one pressure, but he did have 5 tackles and 5 stops. Led the team in stops, defensive stops there. Barron Sorrell played in 1 snap. Carrington Valentine, who we saw last week, get the start over Nate Hobbs. Now, Hobbs played more snaps this week than he did last week. I think last week he played 3. This week he played 19, but still had a very poor grade. Valentine, a pretty poor grade as well, 57.2. Colby Wooden, 54.7 before checking out with injury. Carl Brooks, 46.4, surprising with 0 pressures. Again, the interior defensive line against this banged up interior O-line should have had way more success, and they simply didn't. Nate Hobbs, we talked about him. And then at the very bottom was Quay Walker, who had a very rough game. 38.3, 1 pressure, 4 tackles, and 2 stops. Again, we totaled 9 pressures in this game. I can't hammer this down enough. That's inexcusable. 9 pressures against maybe one of the best offensive lines in the league. You'd understand it a little bit. Hey, we got 1 sack, 9 pressures. It is what it is. We played against a great O-line. They're not a great O-line. They had so many backups there. They even had to furthermore bring in backups during the game due to injury. And to not even get double-digit pressures and 1 sack, I don't know what is going on in terms of this game, but it looked nothing like that typical Green Bay front we've seen, the 8 weeks beforehand. Something's got to give. We got to get pressure. If we don't, you could see why the defense, starts to get kind of beat up. And given we only gave up 16 points and Bryce Young threw 104 yards, it was mainly the run game that tore us up. But still, there were times when Bryce Young had all day in the pocket, was able to scramble around and create plays on a crucial 3rd down and move the chains and just continue to tick the clock down and down and down. The Panthers had a game plan to keep the ball away from the Packers. Now, our offense didn't do anything when they had the ball, but it was a good game plan, right? Take the ball to start the game, drive all the way down, right? Run a lot of clock down. They end up throwing an interception, but they ran a lot of clock in this game. And it was pretty much just playing keep away and keeping the Packers defense on the field and keeping them tired. And they did a good job at it. And they did a really good job stopping our pass rush. All right, so now to quickly go over coverages. These are all going to look decent because, again, they only threw for 104 yards. But Carrington Valentine allowed the most of it. 4 catches on 6 targets for 47 yards. Evan Williams allowed 2 catches for 12 yards. Xavier McKinney allowed 1 catch for 8 yards. Also, of course, had the interception. Nate Hobbs allowed 1 catch for 22 yards to Xavier Legette. That was when he was playing nickel, I believe. Kind of played his zone a little bit too close to the inside. Barely missed that ball that went over top of him on that deep dig. Keyshawn Nixon allowed 1 catch for 1 yard. So, yeah, the penalty was very, very bad, and it essentially gave them a touchdown. But outside of that, Keyshawn Nixon pretty much locked down on these receivers. But, again, they didn't really have to throw the ball much. Edrin Cooper, two catches for 12 yards. Quay Walker didn't have a catch on him, which is the first time I've seen that in a long time. And he still had a very, very poor grade. I would assume in run defense, he was getting washed out a lot of those plays, which is probably what happened. All right, so now let's go over the offensive grades for the Green Bay Packers. But first, I want to dive down into my sleeper picks for tonight's Monday night matchup, Cowboys versus Cardinals. If you want to check out Sleeper, click the link down in the description. Use code BASS when making a first-time deposit. You'll get a 100% match up to $100. Here are my picks for tonight. I have a free pick for Dak Prescott, more than a half a passing yard. So again, a lock there. Sleeper offers free picks for a lot of the primetime games. I have Javonte Williams with an anytime touchdown. I have Jacoby Brissett, more than 245.5 passing yards. And I have Brandon Aubrey making more than 1.5 field goals. So if you want to tail my bet, fade my bet, or make your own picks entirely for tonight's game or any future week, definitely go check out Sleeper. Again, massive shout out to them for being this year's channel sponsor, and use code BASS, B-A-S, when making a first-time deposit. All right, so now let's dive down into the offense, and I really don't know who's going to be at the top here. Dobbs, Jacobs, I think that's really all I have. I don't know because the offense was abysmal yesterday, and just nothing really was going. So let's just get into it. So Aaron Banks actually at the top. He played in 9 snaps. That's a first for him. Josh Jacobs, and then Dobbs is at 8. Okay, so Aaron Banks 86.1, but again played in 9 snaps. I think he left with a stinger and didn't return. Something to monitor going forward. Sean Ryan had to check in, got blown up on that one play, which resulted in Tucker Kraft getting injured, unfortunately. So Aaron Banks in his 9 snaps did have a really good grade, but that's only a small sample size. Josh Jacobs, I think he averaged his highest yards per carry on the year. I think it was at 5.2. but I still feel like the Packers were trying way too much to run the football when honestly, I think they could have had success, just passing the football more downfield rather than all that behind the line of scrimmage stuff that we just continue to see and hate to see. But Jacobs, 81.2. Rasheed Walker, our highest graded lineman that played the whole game at 75.9. But losing Tucker Kraft for the year and what he's been for this offense, our leading receiver, and when this offense is clicking, it's usually because of Tucker Kraft going off. I just don't know how they're going to replicate that. I know a lot of people say, well, it's time for Luke Musgrave to step up. They couldn't be farther from a different player. Like Luke Musgrave is probably the worst yards after catch tight end because he can't stay on his feet, where Tucker Kraft is the best one. Tucker Kraft is a good run blocker. Luke Musgrave is a horrible run blocker. Now, Musgrave has some downfield ability, but that's a little bit different than what we use Tucker Kraft as. Yes, we have thrown him some downfield stuff, but Luke Musgrave is not Tucker Kraft, and I'm hoping he can step up, but I feel like they're going to have to bring in someone that can also block. And I know Fitzpatrick is a decent blocker. They have Josh Wiley on the practice squad who is serviceable for Tennessee. But, you can't replicate this. There's no one you could sign or even trade for that's going to replicate what Tucker Kraft was giving to this offense. It's just a shame. It's just a shame. This is worse than a loss, 100%. But a 74.9 grade he had in the 32 snaps. Zach Tom, 71.9, 65 snaps. Obviously played 100% of the snaps. Jordan Morgan played full-time right guard, had a decent grade with it. Chris Brooks played in 11 snaps, good pass protection grade, which is good because I believe Emmanuel Wilson, had a really poor pass protection grade. I feel like a lot of the time they had free A-gap rushers, which was, it's like, come on, you can't be doing that. Romeo Dobbs, a 68.2. We have Christian Watson, 65.6, who had that really big catch in double coverage early in this game. Elton Jenkins, 65.0. I don't know, guys. I just feel like it just hasn't been great, Elton at center. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, but I expected more. And I just feel like the interior of the offensive line, and given no one can stay healthy, but it's just been in shambles all year. Like the interior has been the problem all year. Like Zach Tom's been great. We know that. Even Rasheed Walker's been serviceable, but I feel like the interior with all the mixing and matching and injuries and inconsistent play, it's been the reason why the Packers, honestly, their offense has been stalling out in times. I feel like it's the interior of the offensive line. Luke Musgrave, 63.7. Started to see him kind of get a few catches after Tucker Kraft left with injury. So again, hopefully he can get going. But Jordan Love, 61.5. Bo Melton played 2 snaps at slot receiver, 58.4. Packers are also so banged up at receiver. He had to check in, and it might continue. Depending if Wicks can come back, what Golden's shoulder injury looks like. Malik Heath, 55.9. John Fitzpatrick, 55.2. Matthew Golden, 53.8. Again, checked out with that shoulder injury. Emmanuel Wilson, 51.4. Sean Ryan checked in at left guard, played a lot of the snaps, and didn't have a good game. I mean, again, the interior has been a lot of the reason why this team has stalled out in certain periods of games. And then Savion, our lowest graded player, kind of checks out. I feel like the moment he fumbled on that first drive, it was like kind of all downhill from there. If the Packers had punched that in that drive, maybe momentum changes things. Maybe they get more going on offense and, take a lead and hold a lead. But right after that, it was just like all downhill from there. Now for blocking and pressures allowed, I think Love only got sacked once, and that was an unblocked rusher. Jordan Morgan, I think just wrong assignment, A-gap, rusher right up the middle, sacked Love. In terms of pressures allowed, they didn't allow that many pressures. Actually, they allowed less pressures than the Carolina Panthers. So the offensive line in terms of pass protection wasn't terrible per se. But Jordan Morgan allowed 2 pressures. Rasheed Walker allowed 2. And then Emmanuel Wilson, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, and Elton Jenkins all allowed 1 pressure apiece. Then I just wanted to go over passing concept just to show you that the Packers, ran 7 dropbacks on a screen play, which was 17.5% of the time. It's like, come on, man. We cannot be running screens that much of the time, especially when it resulted in a total of 13 yards. 13 yards. And a yards per attempt of 2.6. I mean, it's just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Passing depth, Jordan Love was 3 for 5 deep. And, of course, that terrible interception. Medium, he was 3 for 6. Short, he was 15 of 17. And behind the line of scrimmage, 7 attempts behind the line of scrimmage. Like, come on. It's nearly 20% of your pass attempts behind the line of scrimmage. You have Jordan Love. This isn't Andy Dalton. Like, you're not running a backup quarterback and like game managing and just taking what they give you. Like, you have Jordan Love. Yes, he threw a terrible interception, but he can push the ball down the field accurately and make terrific throws. He did so in this game. You know, it's just obviously it's highlighted by that terrible triple coverage throw, but I don't know. I just can't stand the behind the line of scrimmage stuff anymore. It's just getting on my nerves. I'm sure it is for you guys too. Then to just quickly look at the offensive grades for the Panthers. Of course, Josh Nyman near the top, of course. And I believe he went against Gary and Parsons and still had this grade, which is, again, inexcusable. Damian Lewis, 83.0. Rico Dowdle, couldn't stop him. Tet McMillan, he was like their top receiver. At the bottom, we do have their right guard, Chandler Zavala. Bryce Young at a 42.6, yet wins the game. Chuba Hubbard lower in terms of their defense. Let's see some grades here. Roseboom. I feel like every week there's a linebacker like Peyton Wilson last week that has the highest grade. And they just go to work against our interior offensive line and stop every run up the middle or pressure up the middle. And that was the case yet again with Christian Roseboom. Again, the interior of the offensive line has got to get better. Trayvon Merrick near the top. Towards the bottom, we have Nick Scott at safety, Treshawn Wharton at defensive tackle, Bobby Brown, Nick Scorton. So those are all the PFF grades for this nasty Week 9 loss. Packers, of course, have a Monday Night Football game still in Lambeau next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is the tale of two different teams. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers went and beat the Eagles by, say, 10 points. It's honestly like you don't know what Packers team you're going to get. And that's concerning because consistency needs to be figured out. But at the same time, it's like without potentially Tucker Kraft, like we definitely won't have him next week, even if it's an MCL injury. I am worried about that, of course, with this offense. We could be without Wicks, Golden, Kraft, Banks. Like, that's a massive, massive concern heading into, you know, the Eagles and then the Giants. So we'll see how this team responds after something like this. I think a lot of it, in my opinion, does fall back on LaFleur. Preparation, stupid penalties, lack of execution, play calling. A lot of it does. And then the kicking situation, like at the end of the day, that's down to him and Bisaccia. And 2 weeks in a row, they trotted out McManus where we have missed kicks. And every loss or tie the Packers have this year could be boiled down to a missed kick if you look back at it. So maybe they put McManus on IR and just roll with Haversick. That's what I would do, but we'll see what the Packers do. But really appreciate you guys coming by to the video. If you could leave a like down below, it supports the channel a ton. Appreciate you for stopping by. I'll catch you on the next one. And as always, go Pack Go.